Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. You have all seen the NFL running back score the touchdown, tap his heart, and look up to God. What's the story behind this act of apparent faith, and could it be that some of your favorite NFL stars have a testimony and a journey that can impact your life? Del Didway is an award-winning sports writer and author. He's been published in Clubhouse Magazine, Sports Spectrum, and on ToddStarnes.com. He's a contributing writer for Athletes in Action, The Christian View, Bridges Magazine, and PM Magazine. He's the co-editor for Southern Ohio Christian Voice and blogs weekly at deidudit.com. He lives in Lucasville, Ohio with his wife Angie. Here to talk about his new book, First Down Devotions, is Del Didway, and you spell it D-U-D-U-I-T. Del, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you here. You've done something that's kind of interesting, and you've taken you're a journalist and an author, and you've taken both your journalistic approach and your Christian author approach to taking something that people can identify with. They have their favorite players, they wear their numbers. In the world I grew up in, which was the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, Jeremiah 33 was the number on the back of a jersey. It was not a chapter in the Bible. Isaiah 53 would have been, somebody that might have played for the Patriots, but not something that they would look for in the Bible, just because of the secular nature of many in the Jewish community. And I joke about that a lot because that's kind of when I came to faith at age 44 and began to really study the Bible as the inerrant Word of God, not from a rabbinical point of view. It became much more significant to me, and I could actually see these jerseys and people wearing these jerseys and kind of laughing at who their favorite player was because the name and the number happened to have some significant meaning when it came to understanding the Scripture. So you've written this devotional, and it's not your first. You did one for the baseball players. This one's your first in a series that you're doing. This is called First Down Devotions, and your other book, what was it called?
Dugout Devotions.
Dugout Devotions. So that was, you interviewed a number of baseball players. So let's go back and kind of take a look at your faith walk, both in how you came to faith, what drew you to writing, what drew you to sports and writing, and then the trifecta of sports, writing, and faith.
Yeah, my journey to faith, I was about 15, 16 years old at the time. Lived a good life. Wasn't a Christian, but didn't. I was a typical high school boy. Played sports. Got in some trouble, not a lot of trouble, but your typical antics. My brother and his wife, who were older, went to church one night and went to a revival and got saved. And so a few weeks later, they invited me to go. And so I said, yeah, sure. Actually, I wasn't doing anything that night, so I went. And heard the gospel and made the decision that night. Actually, it was the first time there, and been on that journey ever since. So it's been met my wife there at church. We still go to that same church. 30-some years later, we met and we dated for 4 or 5 years, and then she sings and plays the piano. So that's when my journey started on faith. Had my ups and downs like everybody, but right out of college, we both went to Ohio University up in Athens, Ohio. And I wanted to do something else. My degree was in sports industry. I wanted to be on the professional end of sports, front office type of a job, a PR job. Never happened down here where I live. So right out of college, I kind of stumbled onto my now friend, who was a sports editor at the time, was at a college basketball game, and he asked me to keep stats. So I said, sure, I'll have to keep stats. And I did that, and was kind of good at it. So that developed into part-time sports writing, which eventually led to a full-time sports writing job. which is a lot. Sports writing is the funnest job in the world. I wish for a single guy, I mean, you can be married as well, but for a single guy, it was a great job. Um, you know, going to ball games for free, writing about them, meeting everybody. So that's how that started, and it, won a couple of awards my first couple of years into it. Then as life progressed, kids came along, needed to obviously provide financial support, more for sports. So kind of eventually got out of the media, which I kind of regretted because I always loved the media. I was in radio, television, newspaper. And so I dabbled in sports writing for magazines here and there occasionally to fulfill that need I had. And then that's where I found Sports Spectrum, which is a faith-based sports magazine. And I started writing for them, would send them an occasional article and really enjoyed it. And then didn't write for a while. And then my wife was kind of on me to start back because she knew it's what I enjoyed doing. So we had a kind of a traumatic event in our family's life, not my family, but my brother's, one of my brother's family. So I wrote a manuscript. My wife said, write about this. So I did, and I didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go. I just wrote this manuscript. I said, what do I do with this manuscript? So I started researching what to do, about Christian writing, and I stumbled on now is one of my best friends. I found her profile on LinkedIn. We had similar backgrounds, and so I sent her a message, and didn't realize how big she was in this Christian writing world. And she responded. We started talking, and I said, "What do I do? How do I get this out?" And she said, "You need to go to a writers' conference." So lo and behold, I did. I found the Florida Christian Writers Conference down in near Orlando, and went. And that's where I met who's now my agent. And that's how this devotional series also got started. I went down there to pitch this book, but it didn't happen. I sat down with my agent, who was also there at the conference, and we met a gentleman who's a publisher of a well-known Christian publishing company. He liked my background in sports, and he said, "You know what?" And we're over dinner, and I didn't know what was going on. And he said, "You know what would be great? Since you have the sports writing background, about a sports devotional. We could use some of that." I thought, and my agent thought, "Okay, this sounds like a good idea." But I don't think he or my agent thought he knew what I was going to do. So I went back home, and I still have my press credentials from my sports writing days.
Right.
So I started going to Cincinnati Reds games. I started going to Cleveland Indians games and talking to these well-known players who happen to be believers, and started getting their testimonies. And so I would talk to a big name. I would talk to Ben Zobrist of the Cubs, and I'd say, "Hey, I just talked to Ben." I would text him, "I just talked to Ben Zobrist about his testimony." And so that kind of took off. And so I was able to get time with these high-profile men of God who happen to be famous baseball players, like Albert Pujols and Aaron Judge of the Yankees. So I started taking their stories, and we developed this series. And New Hope Publishers loved the concept, and so they said, "Well, how about football?" And so I said, "Sure." So let's do football. So I went to all the Bengals games and got to talk to these well-known Christian athletes and took their stories. So Dugout Devotions and First Down Devotions is not about baseball or football. It's about these struggles that these athletes have gone through, what inspired them. I just happened to use that platform as well-known players.
The approach that you took in interviewing, and this is what I do every day, is interview authors, and then I have a nephew, my nephew Max, is Max Brodsky. He's the producer of E60 for ESPN. So
Okay.
I don't know how many Emmys he's got on the shelf, and they do a very in-depth background. They kind of walk alongside of a sports figure through all aspects of his life. Go back to his home country and the people he grew up with, and coming from Kazakhstan to America to play basketball, and how all of that come about. So very in-depth, and people, it's very relatable. And what you do is very relatable because you are helping us get to know the person through their testimony, through their journey, and then into this devotion as to what came out, what you were able to come out. Did they have a favorite verse? So what was your methodology? How did you approach this? Was it the same for everybody? Did you kind of have points you wanted to make, or was this just as free-flowing and natural as this conversation is with you and I?
Well, my hopes would be they would all be natural, free-flowing, but prior to the games, I don't have a lot of time. Like the ESPN crew, I would only have 4 or 5 minutes to talk to these players. So I have to get to the point, and I have to tell them what I'm doing. And once they find out I want to talk to them about their faith, they open up. And that 2 or 3 minutes may lead to 15 minutes. So that's the fun part of it, because I would approach these athletes or these baseball players before the games when it's a little less, when they have a little bit of time, not a lot of time. But I would always ask them, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about your faith? And most of them would say, oh, sure. I'm rarely asked that question. So, yeah. Well, so I would have a couple of questions, not typical questions, but I would research each person I wanted to talk to and see what they've encountered in their life, the struggles, the successes, and ask them about it and how they overcame certain obstacles. Some players are fantastic to talk to. Some don't want to talk a whole lot, but they'll answer your questions. So I didn't really have a set format. It was just a conversation that, like Brian Dozier, I talked to Brian. He would say something that would really get me asking another question, and he would talk and talk and talk. And so that's how that happened. So it would just kind of, I had a couple of questions, set questions I wanted to ask them to get them going. And then, you hear conversations and you ask about those conversations as they go. And then you always toss in the favorite verse and who encouraged them, things like what obstacles they had. And then as the conversation goes, other questions pop in your mind. And again, once they start talking about that, they enjoy talking about their faith. They are more open to continue that dialogue. I mentioned Brian. Brian, I talked to him 2 or 3 times over the course of the season. He always remembered our conversations, so it was always a fun time to talk to him. And some of these athletes I've gotten to know, we're friendly. A couple of them have turned into friends. But with the NFL, with football, I don't have a lot of time because I can only get to them after a game. And after a game, they want to get in, get cleaned up, go home. So, and if they have a bad game, they don't want to talk a whole lot. So I have to use my discretion on that. But, I'm able to talk. And I tell them up front, hey, I want to talk to you a couple minutes about your testimony or faith, or why you put this on Twitter, or why you put this out. And they open up about it.
It's interesting, the cross-section in this book of players that you've interviewed, from Pro Bowl quarterbacks to Hall of Famers to names that, unless you're a football fan, you might not be all that interested in. But we also see that there's not always continuity between the description of somebody's faith and their application of their faith. And, one that comes to mind would be Ben Roethlisberger of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who you have in here twice, Super Bowl champion quarterback for the Steelers. He's kind of the franchise guy for the Steelers, and he lives a life, and his life is in a glass house. So when you live in a glass house, it's easy to throw a lot of stones because everything is on display. So when you came out with this and first published it, I think that Ben was one that you kind of put out there, and you got a lot of, let's say it made for good radio, it made for good TV, it made for good media, because it caused a response. And in media we look for a reaction. We're not necessarily concerned with a good reaction, bad reaction. We're looking to create fodder where we can eventually lead the narrative back to the gospel message and to the fact that, look, all of us are a work in process. So now that you've arrived, you're able to sit in the judgment seat, and Jesus moved over to make room for you. So, you know, it's a way of using the realities of the King Davids, the realities of people we relate to in the Bible, and we look at people who are quote-unquote heroes to kids, and they're idolized by kids, and they wear their jerseys, and they buy their products, but there's a heart of faith. And Paul, look, Paul talked about his struggle with the flesh and his struggle with this war that went in with him. So here we have a well-known quarterback that's I don't know how many Super Bowls they've won, 4, 5, 11, 12. I don't know. I'm just from there. I left a long time ago. But how was that for you when you began to get feedback in a negative way in trying to keep a gospel-centric focus on the feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. I originally did that piece for Athletes in Action. They're a wonderful organization that profiles, high-profile athletes and their stories. So I had seen on a couple of broadcasts, a couple of articles where Ben had he proclaimed this faith, and I had the same reaction. I thought, really, that's odd, because a few years ago NFL suspended him. He had charges pending, and then eventually dropped for some questionable decisions. Didn't know if he was guilty or not, but all that smoke was all around him, and he had the motorcycle wreck, and so a lot of things are going on in his life. But I stumbled on this piece. I thought, and it made me kind of scratch my head. So I thought, okay. So I dug a little deeper, looked at it, and read some things that made me to believe that he had made a decision. Because I knew actually his pastor's father went to our church. So I kind of didn't have a connection. I thought, I'm going to see if I could talk to him. And then a lot of these quarterbacks are hard to get to in the NFL unless, they just don't do many one-on-ones. So I reached out to the Steelers, and I knew they were coming to town. I thought, can I get 3 minutes with them? And they granted my request, and they sat there. And my first approach to Ben was, I read where you had this decision to follow Christ. You had some situations in the past, like we all have, and he was very open about it. And he said, you know what, I made some dumb decisions back then, and I let money and I let time get the best of me, and I made some stupid decisions. And he started talking about his experience. He said, I grew up in a fundamental church, and I knew right from wrong. And he said, I was sitting in my car and heard the song "Lose My Soul" come over the airways by Toby Mac. And he said, I sat there and I thought, this is at me. I have everything in the world, but I'm losing my soul. And he said, I made the decision right there to get back to God and walk in his footsteps. And he started tearing up and was talking to me. So I was thinking, this man's genuine. I'm not judging him, but I thought he's saying the right things. The emotional response is there. So I went back and put out this piece, and I used them for my devotions. But I caught a lot of heat. The whole object is to put that piece out and get a discussion going. Well, they got a discussion going because the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger, whether you like him or not, they are lightning rods. Fans, if they love him, are on board. If they hate him, they hate him with a passion. So I had a lot of people condemning me for glorifying this man who they believed wasn't living the lifestyle that he should. He had done some things that, even though he was charges were dropped, in their eyes, he was guilty. So that's something we all have to deal with, is people will believe something if it's negative really quickly and love to see somebody fall. So this got this discussion going, and it went crazy on Facebook. I mean, it had like 3,000 shares, hundreds of comments. Good and bad. So, and I normally don't get involved in the comments, but when I started getting personally attacked for them, I kind of felt a need to jump in there. And one of them was funny because I don't know who it was. Some lady got on there and just really raked me over the coals. And somebody I didn't know came to my defense, and they said, "Do you believe in forgiveness? Can Ben be forgiven?" And this person's, and they said, you know, remember the thief on the cross. And this woman responds, well, well, he asked for forgiveness. So I thought, you know what? He really didn't. If you go back and look at Scripture, he said, remember me when I come to my kingdom. He didn't say, forgive me, Lord. Please forgive me. He said, remember me when I come to my kingdom. So I thought, you know what? Ben, to me, when I talked to Ben, he seemed genuine. He did repent. He said that, you know, he asked God to forgive him. He didn't have a need to go out on the public airways and say, hey, everybody, forgive me. God forgives. And so that's all that mattered at that time. And his lifestyle since then has been good. I mean, obviously everybody gets, you know, perfect. I make mistakes. I made some yesterday. So Ben's conversation was a lightning rod because it got a discussion going, and that's what you want to do. You know, some people might not, a person who might not have believed it at least was exposed to the gospel. And if they read the story, they found out God can forgive. So that's the whole idea of this devotion, is to say, you know, Ben was in this situation, whether he's justified or not, whether he caused it or not, who knows? It might have been fabricated. I don't know that. I wasn't there. But out of all of that, he asked for forgiveness. And he is forgiven. And he was forgiven. And now he says he's placed for the Lord. And I have no reason not to believe the testimony he gave me, because it was genuine, it was heartfelt, it was emotional. And here's this guy, you know, 6'6", you know, big guy, sitting there kind of tearing up as he's telling me that, you know, his life was a wreck until God came into it. So that's what this devotion is about. It's about people's experiences, these professional athletes' experiences, and how God intervened.
Well, what's so interesting about this story is that God sent a song.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he looked at it. And the key verse, Ephesians 5:19, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Psalm 105:2, sing unto him, sing psalms unto him, talk ye of all his wondrous works. But the verse that comes to mind is 2 Samuel 14:14, which says, like water falls to the ground and does not return, we all must die, but God devises ways for those who are estranged from him to return. So here at the bottom of Ben's activities, this 2006 to 2010 period when he's in the headlines, a lot of negative attacks, all the trade rags are on him and following him, and the paparazzi's following him and trying to get him caught in every kind of circumstance. And God sends a song at the time in which his heart is open to receive the song. And it was God who devised the way. It wasn't the radio station saying, hey, we're sending this out, want to give a shout out to Ben, and this song's for you, buddy. No, it was God saying, this song is for you, and I want to give you the wake-up call, the jolt you need, that, yeah, you have done. There's a line from Batman 1, when and the gospel of Batman is pretty irrefutable. It may not be God-inspired, but this word is from Jack Nicholson, when he says, if you dance with the devil doesn't change, you do. And that's right. What Ben was saying, right, is that I love the Lord, and I was saved, but I was dancing with the devil, and the devil didn't change, I did, and now I've got to get back to the path that I was on, which is the way, and that's for all of us, and that's why it's an inspiring devotion, because actually you tell the story within the pages that says between 2006 and 2010, Ben's personal life started to unravel. Mm-hmm. So you don't gloss this over by making this, oh, I'm going to have this pretty devotional where everything is la-di-da perfect. This is the real person telling you the real story of their testimony. And these are things that maybe you could use in your day as you just take a moment out, as you relate to somebody that's more famous than you are, richer than you are, aspires to something that maybe you wanted to be as a kid. They accomplished it. You get to know a little bit about their background, about their journey, and about the verses that really relate to their story. We're talking to Del Duduit, spelled D-U-D-U-I-T, author of a new devotion called First Down Devotions, Inspiration from NFL's Best. It's a compilation of devotions of players you know, Kurt Warner, Jim Kelly, Jim Harbaugh, lots of names that Tom Lampier, who is the chaplain for the Minnesota Vikings, that many of these organizations have chaplains. We're very close to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes here in Alabama. The head of it, Dr. Gary Kramer, is a good friend of mine, and University of Alabama is where he is the chaplain. He and that chaplaincy earns him a coach's position on the bench. He's there praying and leading in prayer, and praying over the injured, and the one that just got the stupid foul, and know that they are just going to be ripped apart by Nick Saban. They would rather deal with the Lord at that time than Nick Saban, and they know it's coming. So he goes over to give them a word of comfort and to pray with them and help them through the process. So we're talking with Del Duduit. First Down Devotions. I thoroughly enjoyed this. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear some more of the stories and some more of the insights and experiences that Del had while interviewing a lot of these people that you know as NFL stars. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English, and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Del Duduit, author of First Down Devotions, Inspiration from NFL's Best. Del, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Del, when you were talking with these athletes, what was it that you got a sense of in their, all of them gave credit to God, all of them had this certain faith walk, but did you find that there was something when they, you see them interviewed on ESPN, you see them coming off the field, they're bold, they're brash, they're strong, but do you see a change in countenance? Did you actually notice a transition when they start talking about their faith? Are you seeing a man of faith as opposed to an NFL athlete?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was talking about that, and a lot of the NFL guys I was able to talk to them after the game, after the heat of battle, and after they get cleaned up and they still have the emotions running in their mind. But a lot of them, once I started talking about their faith, I could see a change. I could see them change moods rather than being asked about that first down play or that missed tackle. When I would talk to them about who inspired them, they would soften a lot. But a lot of them had almost not identical stories, but a lot of them had similar stories of faith. Like I would ask them what's their biggest obstacle that they face, and most of them, 8 out of 10 would say they battle identity because they're looked up to and they're admired and they're autograph seekers and cameras following them. So they have to be careful not to get caught up in who society thinks they are.
Right.
And focus on who they are as a man of God, and how they're always they have to be careful of that, not to put themselves up on a pedestal because all their fans do. So they have this humbling spirit about them because they know what God has given them, that he could also take it away from them as well. So in fact, Benjamin Watson talked about he struggled for years with his identity because he thought for a while he was this football star, but God didn't want him. God wanted him to do other things. So that's what they battle a lot. But I could see them soften up a lot, and they were willing and eager to talk to me about their faith.
One of the most common psychological problems that pastors face, one is a certain sense of loneliness, because it's a very difficult job and there's a buffer. The second one is this feeling of being a fraud. That, how can I, this broken sinner, preach a message of holiness when I'm just as hypocritical as the person I'm preaching to? Did you find that in these conversations that one of the aspects of their personal struggle was here they're making $125 million for 5 years of playing a game. It's not a game to them. It's a profession. But to you and I, it's a game. It's a game we play on the streets of our local neighborhood. It's just a game. It's a whole different level for them. But is there kind of a sense of guilt? There's a lot of NFL players that are very involved in charities, very involved in giving back. And then there's those that are very involved in, hey, look at me. I'm the man.
Yeah.
How did that work into the conversation?
Well, most of the gentlemen I spoke with, if being believers, they didn't have that the attitude or this arrogance about them. Now I do see a lot of those down there, but they're not the ones that I want to talk to. So one of them that came to mind actually was Chad Pennington, who I did a couple of devotions on. Chad had a great career with the Jets, and he was traded to Miami. Only one of the few players in the NFL to win the Comeback Player of the Year twice, which is kind of rare. So anyway, I ran into Chad at the Super Bowl, and I knew he had a testimony, and I was able to talk to him about that testimony. And he said his biggest obstacle was his eventual hatred of the game. And you brought up some of these guys draw the attention, and they love the attention. And my point with Chad's devotion was he hated the NFL. He hated football at one point towards the end of his career because he felt betrayed. He felt like he was benched. He felt everybody had turned their back on him, where he has devoted his whole life to this game, and now he was, in his eyes, he was irrelevant. He was expendable. He didn't matter anymore. So he developed this hatred and hated going to work. And he said it was his personal furnace. That's how he described it to me. So he said he was in a hotel, and he just said he fell on his knees and said, God, why am I going through this? I hate this. I hate going to work. And he soon found out, because after he retired, he was hired by the NFL to consult with players who were losing, who had left the league, or who had been fired, or who had been traded, or who got hurt and couldn't play anymore. But they also battled these demons of depression, because once their identity was gone, once their football player status was removed from their lives, then they felt worthless. Who am I now? So he went through that during the season to now help players cope with that. So that was his furnace, and now he knows why he went through that. So that was a very humbling story that he told me, and that how God used his situation to help others now.
So he actually saw the providential hand of God preparing him to be able to use for God's glory what brought him a great deal of pain. It's the Joseph story, it's the David story, it's the Moses story, it's the Elijah story. It's that which pains us the most that brings us to the point almost of breaking, that God says, and like right in the middle of Genesis 30, Genesis more in the maybe 42, 43, God, Joseph is asked about interpreting a dream, and he says, no, I can't interpret dreams, but God can. And we see him finally giving God the point, making sure that he's giving glory where glory is due. Now this player is now put in a position to take his personal experience and say, yeah, when I didn't see the providential hand, when I thought I was a reject, when I had lost my luster, lost my value, I was treated like yesterday's diaper. And I can't be the only one that feels that way. It's kind of interesting that you see so many ball players now getting involved in commercials and actually oversaturating, products that just have no, it's just like another notch, just I've taken on another sponsor, I've taken on another ad. I think Shaquille O'Neal is probably doing more of that. He'll go out and do a commercial for anything, tongue depressors or some odd thing. But these are real people with real families, with real feelings, and I'm sure that, and there are a lot of broke ex-NFL players, just like there are a lot of broke ex-lottery winners, that the money lost its luster because they were foolish with, they didn't invest, they didn't have a financial plan. Then we have conversations with those who went back and got their MBAs and became financial planners and went off and had very successful careers outside the NFL. Their name got them in the door to land the big client who was was in awe of the fact that, oh, so and so called me and they want to come see me. You know, that's how they leverage that, as opposed to the folly. So when you spoke to some of these players, did you find that they had in their testimony that they actually were more focused on storing up treasures in heaven? They were more focused on being good stewards. They were more focused on being good citizens than they were in being of notoriety.
Yeah, one great example of that is when I've had several conversations with Andy Dalton, the quarterback of the Bengals, and a lot of these players have foundations to give back, and so Andy stresses that. He said, I was brought up to be humble. I was brought up to be thankful. He had to have his own experience with the Lord, but as a result of that, as a result of being blessed, he knows he's blessed for playing what we call a game, and that he's well compensated. So he and his wife have this foundation to give back, and a lot of athletes do that, but I like the ones who don't promote it, and Andy doesn't promote it. It's there where everybody knows it's there, but he's not out there, hey, look at me, look at me. In fact, he'll make visits to local hospitals and don't tell anybody, and he doesn't tell anybody. Where some athletes, they take the media with them, look what I'm doing, but he doesn't do that. He goes in, sometimes, without people knowing. So that's what I like, the humility, the humbleness that they have, and I think that comes from being raised right, from serving the Lord, because the Lord tells you that to be humble. So a lot of the athletes who are highlighted in this book do have some type of a foundation that give back to the community, and I think those are the ones who are successful because they give, and so it's given back to them.
I'm a Penn State alum. My years at Penn State were Lydell Mitchell, John Cappelletti, Franco Harris. I mean, it was the glory years of Penn State, and I always remember John Cappelletti and his brother Joey, and him dedicating and devoting his Heisman Trophy to his brother who had Down syndrome, and that was the kind of humility that Payne Stewart had as a golfer. That was the kind of humility that Franco Harris had, and still has, as a wonderful person. What was the most surprising, really open, transparent, or maybe just something that totally just sent you reeling, that you totally unexpected?
One of them was when I was going to try to interview DeAndre Hopkins, who's a very talented receiver with the Houston Texans, good following, great athlete. And it was after a game. He had a great game that night. So I'm there trying to talk to him, and I see him get undressed. I see him get his pads off, so I go up to him. And a lot of media is down there. So I approached him and said, DeAndre, I'd like to talk to you about the faith, and I'd like to get this, talk to you about this certain topic. He goes, well, sure, man, yeah, sure. Let's sit down. So I did. So we started talking about his faith, and by that time, 5 or 6 other cameras were there, right, and reporters were there, and they have a job to do, and I understand it. They have deadlines to meet, and they have to get the story out about the game, because he had a fantastic game that night. So we're talking about his faith, and then these cameras start coming around us, and they're asking questions, and he stops them, and he says, hey, I'm talking to this gentleman here about my faith, all right? So you can stick around and wait till I'm done, or you can leave. It's up to you, but I'm going to talk to him about my faith first. And so he was bold. I love his attitude, that was more important than talking about what he had done that night. He talked about how his grandmother helped him and took him to church all the time, and how his upbringing really developed him as a man who had character. So he was willing to sit there and talk to me first about his faith and tell everybody else about it. So as a result, some of the other media didn't like me that night, but that was fine. So that was really impressed me about him, because he could have easily have said, "Hey, let me answer these questions first,"
Right.
but he didn't. He stayed on topic, and then we had a great conversation. The other reporters were sitting there listening to him talk about his faith. Then when we were done, then they talked about the game.
Which one of the players did you personally identify? Well, you said some of them have become friends. There was a personal connection. At what level is this connection? You obviously were talking about faith, and there was a connection, a click there, wanting to know more about you, having as much interest in you as you had in them. That's really where the balance comes in developing relationships. Where was that for you, and with whom?
Well, I've had a few. The best one, the best example of that is from my first book, Dugout Devotions, which was released back in February. It has to do with high-profile MLB players. I had interviewed Clint Hurdle of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We sat and chatted about his open transparency of his faith. I left him my card when I was done. Said thank you, and here's my card. Not that you'll ever need it. So I always do that. I always leave a card with him.
Right.
And the next day, I get a text, and it's from Clint Hurdle saying, "Hey, Dell, I really appreciated talking to you yesterday. Let's stay in touch." And so we did. We developed this little friendship, and I wouldn't bother him. But if I needed something, I'd text him, and he'd text me. And he followed my blog, and I followed his stuff. And so that friendship developed to the point where I went down to spring training, and he did this little video for me for the book. And then I just happened to ask him, "Hey, Clint, this book's coming out in February. What would be the chance of you doing like a little book signing with me in Pittsburgh?" He said, "I'd love to." And so they came, and we set up the time where he came down and donated 2 hours of his time to sit at a Barnes & Noble with me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and sign books for 2 hours. And I didn't want a dime for it, even though we did donate to his charity, to his foundation. And so that's how that happened. And we've made a couple other good connections with some other athletes that we're trying to do the same thing with for a book coming out.
Was it the Barnes & Noble over in
Waterfront.
on the waterfront? That's where I did my book signing, right there at that Barnes & Noble. So.
Isn't that a great place?
Yeah. My mom lives. It is a great place, and they actually brought in all the inventory from every Barnes & Noble store around the country, because they knew I was from Pittsburgh, and that my mother was she's 93. She kind of is the Jewish mob, and so they brought in, and we sold out all of the inventory, and they back ordered 600, 700 books from the signing. But what a great place to have a book signing, and wonderful people there.
Yeah, there was, and Clint obviously is loved there in Pittsburgh, and so he didn't know what to expect, and we didn't know what to expect. But it was, when you pull up there and you see people standing in line, that's a good feeling. So it was my first really big book signing I had. I was able to get a big name on board with me. That always helps. Right.
The first devotion that you did, which was a baseball one, how's that doing?
It actually hit bestseller status, which was very exciting for me. It was really my first. I had a book out last year called Buckeye Believer. It's an Ohio State devotional.
Where my mother was. That's where my mother was. She's a Buckeye.
We were able to get Jim Tressel on board to do the foreword, so it did well. Dugout Devotions launched in February, my second published book, and it hit bestseller status. I think in part because it has some big names on board. Clint Hurdle endorsed it. Blaine Boyer, who's a former pitcher in the MLB, endorsed it. And we had the book signing, so it did really well. First Down Devotions is off to a good start. It's only been out now for about a month and a half, but it's starting to trend well too. So we're getting ready to start volumes 2 of those. They wanted volumes 2 already, so we were able to interview Tim Tebow for volumes 2 of both devotions, because he played baseball and football.
Right.
So we were able to spend some time with Tim on that, and that was really, really a great experience talking to Tim Tebow.
Yeah, his story from conception
Yeah.
through the pregnancy that to the fact that he was even born
Right.
is just such a testimony. And then for him to come out to be who he is,
Yeah.
and then to be engaged to Miss Universe is another whole testimony in itself. And yet he takes a lot of hits.
And that's why it took me a lot of emails and texting to get an exclusive with him. And I was very blessed to have received it because he came into Columbus, Ohio, to play, with the Syracuse Mets to play the Clippers. And the rules as far as availability with him don't exist. I mean, you can't talk to him. He does one media conference for 10 minutes on the first game, and that's it. So I was able to present to him and his handler why I wanted a couple of minutes myself, and they granted that to me. And so I was the only one able to get an exclusive with him. And we've been with his mom at a couple of book signing events as well. So we've got our picture with her. We've met her, and her story is fabulous, where she was encouraged to abort him. So we know that really well, and we had her in to speak to our local Right to Life recently. So she's a blessing. But to be able to talk to Tim one-on-one, it'd be, like I said, he gets some heat. But you know what? People pack out to see him and hear him because he has a message of hope. And that's what people want to hear. They didn't come and pack out Huntington Park to watch him play baseball. They packed that place out to get a glimpse of him because his message is encouragement, his message is hope. And that's what they want to hear.
Well, and he's living it out, and people are seeing the fruit of his labors. That he's the humility to not be the star NFL or the star of any major league team is. Hey, listen, I love the sport. I want to play the sport. I'm going to play the sport. That's what I want to do, and I want to live out my life, and I want to bring joy to others, and it's going to give me a platform to go to a lot of cities where I can speak and I can bring a message and it can expose me to a lot of people, and I can show them what living as a believer looks like, even with fame, fortune, and notoriety.
Yeah, that was one of the topics we discussed. Was he said, I said, how do you juggle this entourage and this fame? And he says, you know what? God has given me this platform, so I can go into Children's Hospital.
Right.
And I can deliver this message. He said, I have to put up, he didn't say it negative, he said, I have to put up with answering more questions, but that's okay because I get to go visit kids who want to see me. So I'll deal with the 15, 20-minute questions from the media if I can go talk to these kids. So he handles it well. His attitude's perfect on that. It is all humility. He knows he's blessed, and he gives back. And that's why my wife and I volunteer at his Night to Shine. And that was one of the reasons I was able to talk to him, because I was able to show his handlers, hey, my wife and I go to this event. I put on my tuxedo, and I've been down to Shine Shoes for 3 hours.
Right.
And we love it.
Right.
And so that, he thought, hey, Dell's given time to my foundation. I'll give him time as well.
There you go.
So that was an awesome experience.
We've been talking with Del Duduit, that's spelled D-U-D-U-I-T, author of First Down Devotions, Inspiration from NFL's Best. Great devotional, great, if you're a sports fan, great insight into lots of players that you might really enjoy. And for you who say, I wouldn't really pick up one of those girly devotionals, well, it's not a girly devotional. It's actually a bunch of sweaty guys that get up in uniform and play a hard game, and yet there's a softer side to them, the face side of them, that's completely exposed, and Del does a great job of uncovering that and bringing you the essence of what the message is. Del Duduit, thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Well, thank you. I want to give a nice plug to New Hope Publishers and my agent, Kyle Young, and they all did a great job, and had some contributing authors of the book, Michelle Medlock Adams, Kyle Young, Scott McCausey, Becky Lindsay, Ryan Farr. They all helped out.
Great. Well, New Hope is walking distance from our studio. So we think a lot of them. Thanks so much. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.